First contact's first shock. The Valaxian ship descended through Earth's atmosphere with all the grace of a nervous dancer. Inside, senior diplomat Zex 427 watched the approaching landscape through their primary sensor array, their crystalline form shifting through shades of anticipation green. This was supposed to be a routine first contact with a pre-FTL civilization that had just achieved quantum communications. The preliminary scans had shown cities, agriculture, and what appeared to be a balanced ecosystem. Nothing in their briefings had prepared them for what their atmospheric sensors were now reporting. This can't be correct, Zex's assistant, Vir 189, chittered, their crystalline appendages vibrating with distress. The oxygen levels alone would support combustion of most organic matter. And these atmospheric pressure variations, how does anything survive here? Zex forced their outer crystal lattice to maintain a professional rigidity. The humans have survived here for thousands of years. Surely they must have developed sophisticated environmental control systems. The words were meant to be reassuring, but even as they spoke them, their secondary sensors picked up movement on the ground below. Large movement. The ship's AI helpfully magnified the image. A massive brown creature was fishing in a river, its powerful arms ending in what appeared to be natural weapons. Computer, classify that organism, Zex commanded. Species, Ursus arctos. Common name, grizzly bear. Status, apex predator of the region. Capable of running at speeds exceeding 35 kilometers per hour, lifting objects weighing up to 500 kilograms. And enough. Vir interrupted, their crystal structure nearly vibrating apart in horror. And the humans, they coexist with these creatures. The answer came from their human liaison, Dr. Sarah Chen, whose voice crackled through their communication system. We're ready to receive you at the landing site. Don't worry, we've cleared the area of any large wildlife. The way she said it so casually sent harmonic shivers through the entire Valaxian crew. The landing went smoothly, though the Valaxians insisted on performing 3 separate atmospheric safety checks before even considering opening their outer doors. When they finally emerged, encased in their finest protective crystalline shells, they found Dr. Chen waiting with a small delegation of humans, none of whom were wearing environmental suits, or armor, or even basic force field generators. Welcome to Earth, Dr. Chen smiled, extending her hand in what their cultural briefings had explained was a traditional human greeting. Zex matched the gesture carefully, marveling at how fragile the human's appendages appeared. We've prepared a presentation on Earth's ecosystems to help you understand our world better. The presentation room in the First Contact Center was comfortable by human standards, which meant the Valaxians spent the first 10 minutes adjusting their crystalline structures to accommodate the bizarre atmospheric pressure. Dr. Chen dimmed the lights and activated a large display screen. Let's start with something simple, she began. This is a typical North American forest ecosystem. The images that followed would haunt Zex's memory crystals for cycles to come. Creatures called wolves hunting in coordinated packs, mountain lions stalking prey from trees, and most terrifying of all, something called a honey badger that seemed to fear absolutely nothing. These creatures, Zex managed to ask, their voice modulator barely maintaining coherence, they're contained in special facilities. Oh no, Dr. Chen replied cheerfully. These are all wild animals. In fact, many humans enjoy hiking and camping in areas where these animals live. The entire Valaxian delegation shifted to emergency coral, their color for extreme distress. Hiking, Vir asked, their translation crystal struggling with the concept. You mean, deliberately walking through predator-inhabited territories. For pleasure. It's really quite safe if you take proper precautions, Dr. Chen assured them, seemingly oblivious to the existential crisis she was causing. We have well-established guidelines for wildlife encounters. Would you like to see our bear safety video? There are enough of these bears that you need standardized safety protocols, Zex asked, their horror crystals now fully activated. Oh yes, Dr. Chen nodded enthusiastically. And that's just for bears. We have different protocols for moose, cougars, alligators. The list continues. Ver's voice had risen to a frequency that threatened to shatter lesser crystals. Would you like to see our collection of trail cameras? We've captured some fascinating footage of natural behaviors. As Dr. Chen pulled up more footage, Zex made a mental note to completely revise their first contact protocols. Clearly, any species that could survive, and even thrive, in such conditions needed to be approached with far more caution than they'd initially assumed. The humans weren't just surviving here. They were casually documenting the apex predators that shared their world as if they were collecting interesting specimens of mineral formations. And here's my favorite part. Dr. Chen continued, seemingly energized by their obvious distress. This is what we call a Wolverine. They're not very large, but they've been known to chase bears away from their territory. As the footage played, showing a relatively small creature fearlessly confronting a bear several times its size, Zex came to a profound realization. They hadn't discovered a primitive pre-FTL civilization at all. They'd found something far more interesting and terrifying. They'd found a species that had evolved alongside monsters and somehow decided that was perfectly normal. The real question wasn't how humans had survived on this death world. The real question was, what kind of species did you have to become to look at a planet full of apex predators and think, yes, this is fine? The assessment. The Valaxian High Council's emergency meeting was being held in a reinforced chamber aboard their orbital ship, as none of the delegation members were willing to return to the surface without a full assessment of human defensive capabilities. The chamber's walls displayed a continuous feed of Earth's surface data, which wasn't helping anyone's peace of mind. They must have something, Zex insisted, their crystalline form cycling through shades of analytical blue. Some hidden technology, some secret weapon that allows them to survive in these conditions. No species could evolve to this level of civilization while constantly under threat from such creatures. The surveillance feeds showed humans going about their daily lives in various settings. A group of children played in a park while their guardians chatted nearby, seemingly unconcerned about the open space around them. A farmer worked in their field with nothing but a simple fence between them and the wilderness. A jogger ran along a trail that, according to their scans, was frequently used by multiple predator species. Perhaps, senior analyst Cry 885 suggested, their structure vibrating with scientific curiosity. We should conduct a formal assessment of their defensive capabilities. The humans seem open to sharing information, which was how Dr. Chen found herself trying to explain the concept of a wildlife deterrent spray to a group of increasingly agitated aliens. Let me understand this correctly, Zex said, their voice modulator struggling to maintain a professional tone. Your primary defense against one of your planet's most dangerous predators is spicy air. Bear spray is quite effective, Dr. Chen explained, holding up the small canister. It's a concentrated form of capsaicin that irritates the bear's sensory organs and usually encourages them to leave the area. Usually. Ver's crystal structure nearly shattered at the word. Well, no deterrent is 100% effective, Dr. Chen admitted. That's why we also teach awareness and avoidance techniques. The Valaxians' collective color shift to emergency coral was becoming a familiar sight. And these awareness techniques, Cry asked, they consist of making noise while you hike, watching for signs of animal activity, proper food storage, maintaining appropriate distance when you spot wildlife. Distance, Zex interrupted. You mean you intentionally remain in the area after detecting a predator's presence? Sometimes it's best to stay and observe, especially if you're in a safe position. Many of our best wildlife photographs come from photographs. The harmonics of Ver's voice threatened to crack the observation window. You stopped to take images of the creatures that could kill you. Dr. Chen pulled up some examples on her tablet, not noticing how the Valaxians recoiled from each swipe of her finger. Here's a series I took last summer of a mother grizzly teaching her cubs to fish. And this one is a wolf pack taking down an elk, though maybe we should skip that one. What are these structures? Cry asked suddenly, their analytical programming latching onto something in the background of one image. Oh, those are just regular houses. This was taken near the edge of town. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Ver's crystals realigning after a minor structural collapse. Your dwellings, Zex said carefully, have no energy shields, no automated defense systems, no emergency teleportation capabilities. We have fences, Dr. Chen offered, and really good insurance policies. The Valaxians spent the next several hours examining human defensive technologies. Each revelation seemed to distress them more than the last. Simple wooden doors, glass windows, screen porches that weren't even airtight, let alone predator-proof. Their horror reached new heights when they discovered humans often intentionally created holes in their dwellings for small local fauna to enter and exit freely. You invite the creatures into your homes. Cry's usual scientific detachment was cracking. Bird feeders and bat houses can be great for local ecosystem management, Dr. Chen explained. Though you do have to be careful about accidentally attracting bears. These bears, Zex noted, their data crystals whirring with activity, seem to feature prominently in many of your safety considerations. Oh, they're not even our most dangerous wildlife, Dr. Chen said brightly. Would you like to learn about hippopotamuses? Or maybe Australian wildlife? There are more dangerous creatures. Ver had to be helped back to structural stability by 2 assistant diplomats. Well, statistically speaking, the most dangerous animal on Earth is actually the mosquito, due to disease transmission. The revelation that humans also contended with microscopic threats sent the entire delegation into emergency meditation cycles. When they emerged, Zex had come to a decision. We need to observe these humans in their natural habitat, they announced. Not just their technological defenses, but how they actually interact with these threats on a daily basis. Only then can we truly understand what we're dealing with. I can arrange a visit to one of our national parks, Dr. Chen offered. Would you like to meet some of our rangers? As the Valaxians prepared for their field expedition with the same gravity they usually reserve for military operations, Zex couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something fundamental about human nature. No species should be able to survive, let alone thrive, under these conditions with such primitive defenses. Yet here the humans were, not just surviving, but apparently enjoying their dangerous coexistence with Earth's wildlife. The question was no longer just how they did it, but why they chose to live this way when they clearly had the technological capability to create safer environments. The answer, Zex suspected, would either elevate humanity in the galactic community's eyes or confirm their worst fears about human recklessness. The park ranger. Park Ranger Maria Rodriguez had dealt with all sorts of visitors during her 15 years at Yellowstone National Park, but this was definitely a first. The crystalline aliens before her had arrived in what looked like personal tanks, complete with what she strongly suspected were weapons systems, though Dr. Chen had assured her they were just atmospheric sensors. Welcome to Yellowstone, Maria began, trying to maintain her usual cheerful professional demeanor. Before we begin our tour, I'll need to go over some basic safety protocols. Your defensive protocols, yes, Zex interrupted, their crystalline form gleaming with what might have been excitement or terror. We are most interested in learning your advanced survival techniques. Maria glanced at Dr. Chen, who gave her an encouraging nod. Well, the most important thing is to stay alert and give animals their space. We recommend maintaining a distance of at least 100 yards from bears and wolves. Only 100 yards. Ver's voice cracked with static. Without energy shields. That's actually a very conservative distance, Maria explained. Most wildlife will avoid human contact if given the chance. Now, everyone should carry bear spray. The Valaxians had already been briefed on bear spray, and their reaction was immediate. Several of them began emanating a high-pitched hum that Maria felt in her teeth. Perhaps, Dr. Chen suggested gently, we should start with something less challenging. Maria, Could you show them how you conduct your daily patrols? The next hour was spent following Maria as she checked trail conditions and wildlife tracking stations. The Valaxians insisted on scanning every footprint they found, creating detailed three-dimensional models of what they called biological weapon impressions. And these markings, Cry asked, hovering over a tree with claw marks, they're territorial warnings. Yes, bears often mark trees to communicate with other bears, Maria explained. We can learn a lot about the local population from these marks. You decode predator communications. Zex's structure shifted to what might have been impressed purple. It's not exactly decoding, Maria said. We just observe and document natural behaviors. For example, from these marks, I can tell this is probably a male grizzly, about 7 feet tall when standing. 7 feet. The Valaxians collectively backed away from the tree. And you track these creatures without combat support? Well, I do have my radio. Maria patted the device on her belt. And years of experience. She was interrupted by movement in the brush ahead. A young moose emerged onto the trail, causing the Valaxians to activate what appeared to be personal force fields. Don't worry, Maria said calmly. If we stay quiet and give it space. But it's enormous. Vur's crystal structure was vibrating so fast, they were starting to produce a musical tone. And according to our database, these creatures are highly territorial. Only during mating season, or if they feel threatened, Maria assured them. This one's just passing through. See how its ears are relaxed. It knows we're here but isn't concerned. The Valaxians watched in horrified fascination as the moose ambled across the trail and disappeared into the woods on the other side. Their sensors whirred continuously, recording every moment. You can interpret their behavioral signals. Cry asked, their scientific curiosity seemingly overcoming their fear momentarily. It's part of our training. Maria nodded. Understanding animal behavior is key to safe wildlife management. Would you like to see how we use trail cameras to monitor? A series of howls echoed across the valley, cutting her off. The Valaxians immediately clustered together, their protective fields forming an overlapping dome. That's just the wolf pack that lives in the northern range, Maria explained, pulling out her tablet. Actually, this is perfect timing. We've been tracking this pack for years. According to our data, they should be moving their pups to a new den site soon. You maintain surveillance on pack predator movements, Zex asked. For tactical response planning. For research and conservation, Maria corrected. We're trying to understand their hunting patterns and territory use to better protect both the wolves and their prey species. Protect the predators. The concept seemed to short-circuit something in the Valaxians' translation matrix. Of course, Maria said, warming to her favorite subject. Apex predators are essential for maintaining healthy ecosystems. For instance, since we reintroduced wolves to Yellowstone, we've seen significant positive changes in reintroduced. The harmonics of Vur's voice threatened to shatter nearby windows. You deliberately brought them back. Maria spent the next 20 minutes explaining the concept of rewilding and ecosystem restoration. The Valaxians listened with what seemed to be equal parts horror and fascination, their crystals cycling through colors she hadn't seen before. Let me understand this, Zex said finally. Your species not only adapted to survive alongside these predators, but actively works to ensure their continued existence, even after developing technologies that could easily eliminate them. Eliminate them? Maria looked genuinely shocked. That would be horrible. These animals are a vital part of our natural heritage. In fact, one of my favorite parts of this job is helping people understand and appreciate. A sudden crash in the underbrush sent the Valaxians into defensive formation. A squirrel emerged, carrying an acorn. Perhaps, Dr. Chen suggested diplomatically as the aliens tried to recover their composure, we should break for lunch. Excellent idea, Maria agreed. I know a lovely picnic spot with a great view of the valley. Sometimes we even see bears foraging on the opposite slope. The high-pitched keening from the Valaxian delegation suggested that perhaps they should reconsider the lunch location. As Maria led them back toward the visitor center, she couldn't help but notice how they kept their sensors trained on every rustle in the vegetation, every bird call, every shifting shadow. What seemed like normal background noise to her was apparently a symphony of terror for them. Yet here she was, walking these trails every day with nothing but bear spray, a radio, and her trained senses. Maria suddenly understood why the aliens found humans so perplexing. To them, she must seem either insanely brave or just insane. The incident. The afternoon tour was proceeding about as well as could be expected, which meant the Valaxian delegation had only activated their emergency shields twice, once for a golden eagle flying overhead and once for what turned out to be a chipmunk. Maria was just beginning to think they might make it through the day without any major incidents when her radio crackled to life. "Rodriguez, come in. We've got a situation developing in Sector 7. The Valaxian sensors immediately swiveled toward her radio, their crystalline forms shifting to alert amber. Maria keyed her radio, maintaining her calm professional demeanor. "Rodriguez here. What's the situation?" "Wolf pack moving through the valley earlier than expected. They're herding an elk herd right toward your location. Recommend immediate relocation to observation. Point Delta." Before Maria could respond, Zex's translation matrix kicked in. "Predator pack engaging in coordinated hunting maneuvers in our vicinity. It's a natural hunting pattern," Maria assured them. "We just need to move to a better observation point. There's a ranger station about half a mile exposed to pack predator activity." Ver's crystals were vibrating at frequencies that made nearby pebbles dance. "We should activate the emergency teleporters." "We don't have teleporters," Dr. Chen reminded them gently. "But Ranger Rodriguez knows exactly how to handle this situation." Maria was already checking her tablet's GPS. "If we head east along this trail, we'll reach an elevated position with good visibility. The wolves are unlikely to." A distant howl cut through the air, followed by several answering calls. The Valaxians' color shifted to what Maria could only assume was their version of panic white. Those vocalizations, Cry's scientific detachment was cracking. They're coordinating their attack vectors. "They're actually communicating about the elk herd's location," Maria corrected, already leading the group toward the trail. "This is perfectly normal behavior. The pack we're hearing is one we've studied for years. The alpha female actually has a distinctive howl pattern that." "You've cataloged their tactical signals?" Zex asked, their voice modulator struggling to maintain composure as they hurried along the trail. "We document all aspects of their behavior," Maria explained, pausing to check their position. "It helps us understand their social structure and hunting patterns. For instance, this pack has developed an interesting strategy for." The bushes ahead rustled violently. The Valaxians froze, their defensive fields humming to full power. A massive bull elk burst onto the trail, sides heaving, eyes wide. Behind it, they could hear the sounds of pursuit. "Everyone stay calm," Maria commanded, her voice carrying an authority that made even the panicking aliens pause. "Move slowly to the side of the trail. Give the elk plenty of room." The elk charged past them, steam rising from its flanks in the cool air. Moments later, 3 wolves emerged from the undergrowth, running full tilt in pursuit. They barely seemed to notice the humans and aliens, focused entirely on their quarry. "Fascinating," Cry whispered, their scientific programming apparently overriding their terror momentarily. "Their pursuit algorithms are remarkably efficient." "Pack hunting strategies are incredibly sophisticated," Maria agreed, watching the wolves disappear into the forest. "They've learned to use the terrain to their advantage and coordinate their movements to conserve energy while." More rustling interrupted her. 2 more wolves appeared, these ones moving more slowly, clearly following their packmates' trail. They paused when they saw the group on the trail. The Valaxians' defensive fields crackled with energy. "Don't move," Zex whispered, though their translation crystal was shaking so hard it made the words warble. Their visual acuity is movement-based, yes. Actually, that's more of a T-Rex thing, Maria said calmly, keeping her eyes on the wolves. These two are just assessing whether we're a threat or an opportunity. Standard procedure is to make ourselves look large and maintain eye contact while slowly. You advocate direct eye contact with apex predators. Ver's structure was vibrating so fast, they were starting to blur. The wolves watched them for what felt like an eternity to the aliens, but was probably only about 30 seconds. Then, with a casual disinterest that somehow made the whole situation more surreal, they trotted off after their packmates. See, nothing to worry about, Maria smiled. They're far more interested in the elk than in us. Now, who'd like to learn about wolf pack hierarchy and hunting success rates? You're collecting combat effectiveness data, Zex asked weakly. Research data, Dr. Chen corrected. For conservation purposes. The walk back to the visitor center was conducted in what Maria considered a reasonable pace, but what the Valaxians would later describe in their report as a controlled evacuation under possible predator surveillance. Every snapping twig made their crystals chime with tension. I don't understand, Zex said finally, after they'd reached the relative safety of the parking lot. You have the technology to build cities, to travel to space, to communicate across quantum distances. Yet you choose to maintain these dangerous creatures, study them, even protect them. Why? Maria looked out over the park, where the sun was starting to set over the mountains. In the distance, a wolf howled, probably celebrating a successful hunt. The Valaxians flinched, but Maria smiled. Because they were here first, she said simply. Because every creature out there, from the wolves to the bears to even the mosquitoes, plays a part in making this world what it is, and because understanding them, living alongside them, learning to coexist, that's part of what makes us human. The Valaxians were quiet for a long moment, their crystals shifting through thoughtful shades of blue and purple. Finally, Cry spoke. Perhaps we have been approaching this wrong. We've been looking for your defensive technologies, your survival strategies. But maybe what we should be studying is your perspective. Would you like to see our evening wildlife presentation? Maria offered. We have some wonderful footage of wolf pups learning to hunt. The collective color shift to emergency coral suggested that maybe they weren't quite ready for that level of perspective just yet. The understanding. The Valaxian High Council's emergency session was entering its third day. The chamber's walls displayed a continuous stream of data collected during their Earth expedition, including footage that made several junior analysts excuse themselves to recalibrate their harmony crystals. To summarize our findings, Zex addressed the council, their crystalline form emanating the deep blue of formal presentation mode. The humans not only survive on their death world, they actively celebrate it. They create designated wilderness areas, specifically to preserve dangerous creatures. They maintain detailed records of predator activities not for defense, but for scientific understanding. And perhaps most remarkably, they venture into these areas voluntarily, for something they call recreation. Surely there must be significant casualties, one council member interjected, their crystals pulsing with concern. That's the most fascinating part. Cry stepped forward, their scientific excitement causing small rainbow refractions across the chamber. Despite living alongside creatures that could easily kill them, human casualty rates from wildlife encounters are surprisingly low. They've developed an intricate understanding of animal behavior and basic safety protocols that, while primitive by our standards, prove remarkably effective. The council chamber filled with the harmonic hum of multiple crystalline beings processing this information simultaneously. On the displays, footage showed humans hiking through forests, camping in mountains, and even diving in oceans filled with creatures that, by any reasonable standard, should have made such activities impossible. Consider their rangers, Ver added, having finally recovered enough stability to join the discussion. These humans spend their entire careers in close proximity to apex predators, armed with nothing more than simple chemical deterrents and communication devices. Yet they display no signs of psychological trauma. In fact, they appear to enjoy their work. "I believe we've been asking the wrong questions," Zex announced. "We've been seeking to understand how humans defend themselves against their world's dangers. But that's not what they're doing at all. They're not fighting against their environment. They're dancing with it." The chamber's crystals chimed with confusion. "Explain," the head council member requested. Zex activated a series of recordings from their expedition. Dr. Chen explaining ecosystem balance, Maria tracking wolf movements, tourists photographing bears from a safe distance. Each clip showed humans not conquering or cowering from nature, but engaging with it in a complex choreography of respect and understanding. "Other species we've encountered either developed heavy defensive technologies or artificially sanitized their environments to eliminate threats," Zex continued. "Humans took a different path. They studied their predators not to destroy them, but to understand them. They learned to read subtle signs in their environment, to anticipate and avoid dangers rather than trying to eliminate them. They developed what they call wilderness skills, not as a temporary survival measure, but as a fundamental part of their culture. This explains much about their technological development path," Cry added. "While other species focused on creating impenetrable barriers between themselves and their environment, humans developed tools and techniques that allowed them to interact with their world more effectively. Their technology complements their natural abilities rather than replacing them." The council chamber filled with thoughtful harmonics as the implications became clear. On the displays, footage showed a human child being taught to identify animal tracks, an elder explaining weather patterns to a group of students, a family carefully storing food in bear-proof containers before settling in to watch the sunset from their campsite. "They've turned simple survival into an art form," Ver observed, their crystals shifting to philosophical purple, each generation passing down not just knowledge, but a way of seeing and moving through their world. More than that, Zex's voice carried the resonance of profound realization. This relationship with their environment has fundamentally shaped their species. Their ability to adapt, to problem solve, to face challenges with innovation rather than force. These aren't despite their dangerous world, but because of it. The head council members' crystals pulsed with decision-making energy. "Your recommendations. We must radically revise our assessment of human potential," Zex stated firmly. "Any species that can look at an apex predator and think, 'I should study this,' rather than 'I should destroy this,' has a perspective that could be invaluable to the galactic community. Their ability to coexist with dangers rather than simply overwhelming them with technology suggests a level of adaptability and wisdom we hadn't previously considered. Though perhaps," Ver added, their crystals tinged with lingering trauma, "we should conduct future cultural exchanges in their urban centers rather than their wilderness areas." "Actually," Cry interjected, displaying new data, "human cities have their own unique ecosystem challenges. For instance, in what they call Australia, even their urban areas contain numerous species of venomous." The sudden harmonic shriek of multiple crystalline beings shifting to emergency choral cut off the rest of their report. As the council chambers descended into chaos, Zex reflected that perhaps humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology, or their survival skills, or even their understanding of their world's dangers. It was their ability to look at a planet full of creatures designed by evolution to kill them, and decide that these creatures were not obstacles to be overcome, but neighbors to be understood. In a galaxy full of species that tried to control their environments, humans had learned to dance with theirs, even if, Zex had to admit, it was the kind of dance that gave crystalline beings stability nightmares.